Let's talk about harm reduction in Seattle. Let's talk about, are less people dying or more? And if we're say reducing harm but more people are dying, maybe we're not.
Welcome to Restorations. I'm Caitlyn McKenney, and I'm excited to share with you a conversation with Art Dahlen, the founder of Battlefield Addiction. But before we get into that, if you live in Washington State, you should be aware of a piece of legislation that is reportedly being drafted currently. According to local commentator Jason Rance, Washington State Representative Mia Gregerson has drafted legislation that would prohibit, and I'm quoting from the bill here, any law, policy, or practice regulating public space that results in disparate treatment or has a disparate impact on people who are homeless. So no laws, no policies, no practices that impact people experiencing homelessness in what could be considered as discriminatory. For example, the city of Burien has a ban on public camping that would be deemed unlawful under this state law. And in theory, a ban on public drug use, given that it has a disproportionate impact on people experiencing unsheltered homelessness, would also be unlawful. So would encampment removals, pressure washing the sidewalks downtown, or hiring private security that move people along from in front of storefronts. All of these practices would presumably violate state law. Now, this law would seem to be in direct contradiction with the Supreme Court ruling in Grants Pass v. Johnson that was decided on earlier this year. The case was about the constitutionality of public camping bans, and the central argument in that case was whether or not camping bans prohibited behavior or status. Is a camping ban a ban on behavior or a ban on being homeless? And the court ruled that it is not a ban on being homeless and gave local jurisdictions the authority to craft those kinds of laws. Clearly, this draft state legislation in Washington takes the opposite position and takes it to the extreme, prohibiting any kind of governing that regulates or restricts the use of public space. So is this a law that the people of Washington State would support? I have my doubts about that. But what I do know is that on November 5th, 58% of voters in Arizona voted in favor of legislation that stands in stark contrast to the Washington draft law. Proposition 312 passed with a 58% yes vote in support of legislation that would allow property owners to get a refund on their property taxes if their local leaders failed to enforce laws against public camping, loitering, panhandling, public urination, or public drug use. So not only are these behaviors unlawful in Arizona, but property owners can actually be compensated by the government when it fails to enforce the law, and they bear the consequences of that failure. Imagine how different Washington and Arizona will look if Arizona takes this path and Washington goes down the path of zero regulation of public space. I think that in a caring, just, and clear-thinking society, the danger and harm to everyone involved of encampments or drug use is not accepted as normal and is certainly not set apart as an ungovernable, untouchable territory. How many lives that we've lost in Washington would be here with us today if there were enforced laws against, say, sleeping in a tent next to the freeway that goes up in flames months later, or using the deadliest drug in history out on the streets of downtown Seattle? I hope that the leaders of our state will recognize that this legislation is not kind, it is not compassionate, and it is not fair, and redirect their energy and efforts towards helping all Washingtonians get on the path to a safe and healthy life. I will certainly be keeping my eye on this legislation as we enter the new year, and you should be too. Now let's hear the personal story of the founder of Battlefield Addiction and his insights on how we treat addiction here in Seattle. You may be surprised by some of what he has to say. Here's Art Dahlen. Hey, welcome, Art, to Restorations. Thank you for being here today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you.
Let's start off. First, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and Battlefield Addiction?
Yeah, normal kid, grew up in South King County, 17 years in active addiction, heroin, crack cocaine, opiates of all kinds. Got sober in 2011, February 16th was my sober date. From the very start, and the way I got sober was, I like to say, a family learned how to finally treat me. The treatment that they provided, the way they were with me, was this lifestyle that I had, or this thing that I had. I still call it an addiction, that it must stop or I was no longer qualified to be in this family.
And this is your family?
This is my family. Yeah, this is my family kind of waking up one day and saying, we can't allow him to do this anymore. When they did, they cut off any other opportunity to be part of the family without being sober. And that was the treatment that I needed. I needed to be treated that way. And they also told me that if I proceeded in this thing, I wouldn't get access to them and I wouldn't get to be around my family anymore. And to me, that was something that I really wanted. I knew the day was coming always, but this is finally how it got there, was my dad, was firm, and he held firm, and he said, this stops today, son. He had enough power where he made that happen for me. Mm-hmm. And, it may sound harsh to other people, but for me, it was what I needed. I needed that sort of treatment. And so that led to sobriety, that led to recovery. And my recovery was prompted by everything else being taken away and getting to a place where I knew there was no way to go forward. And so now I was going to have to kind of take on the pain of my life and where I'd gotten. And there was no door to sneak out of. It was just factual. This is where I'm at. And so he guided me through that process. My own father did. Mm-hmm. And he required more of me every step of the way. And he didn't let me have any excuses. And I love him for that. And he was going to die about 7 months later. He was on his deathbed. And I was able to be with him for 7 months before he passed. That was what was required for me in that time. And so, but quickly after he passed and after I got going, I helped drug addicts, I say, for two reasons. One, I didn't know what else to do. I hadn't worked in a lot of years. I hadn't contributed to society in any way. And then I knew how to do it, I thought. This was something that I knew how to do it. And I kind of likened myself a hero, so I tried to play this hero role of saving other people. It worked, and as it went on, I opened up sober livings and I did all this kind of work, and I bought a treatment center, but something was missing. There was not kind of a mechanism. What I started noticing was it wasn't the treatment that I was providing, it was the treatment that life provided them before they got to me. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If life provided the proper treatment, I could get a person into a place where I could actually, where they could hear me, where teachings and information could come in and be used. Those that we had success with were because they're not by their own volition, but life had treated them a certain way that there was no other option. And they came to me with that. Nobody has ever really came to me that wanted it. They just haven't. It's just the myth I hear. I've been helping a lot of people for a lot of years, and I've never got that one person that says, they always say like this, they'll go, I'm doing this for me. And I'll go, yeah, but weren't you put in jail and told that if you didn't do this, you were going to go to prison? Like, yeah. So I said, okay, well, you see, there's kind of a thing there. People will say, they need to hit bottom. And then they'll also say, they need to want it. Which one is it?
Two different.
Which one is it?
Yeah.
What makes them want it? Well, it's the bottom that makes them want it. And if you're lifting up the bottom, they will never want it. And so it's this thing of like, no, nobody wants it. Nobody wants to hit bottom. That's like saying somebody needs to stop on a freeway. They need to hit a wall. Somebody needs to want to stop on a freeway. They need to hit a wall. Well, nobody wants to hit a wall, and nobody wants to stop, but they hit a wall. That's what makes them stop, you see? So it's the wall. It's not the want.
And for you, that was your family.
They gave me no other option.
Yeah.
They made me want it. I didn't want it. In fact, I'll even tell you, at one point when I got sober, when I was getting sober in early recovery, I was actually in a place where I wished at day 15, 16, I was like, man, if my family was just all gone, I could get high and not feel this guilt. If they could just go away, But that wasn't possible. They didn't make that possible. That's how they treated my addiction. I love them for that, you see? So, really quickly we started helping, and I met my current wife, Angie, and we began to bring in the family side. And we began to see that if the family didn't treat it correctly before they got to us, if they still allowed a door to be open, if they were still providing resources to it, if they were still giving money to it or whatever, then we couldn't treat them. That we couldn't do our stuff. We couldn't. I always think, what do people think treatment is? Do they think it's like an ointment? Like we're in the center and they're in a bed and we're lathering up with some type of ointment on them and giving them the treatment? No, treatment is what happens before they get to us, which then prompts the want to be in recovery. And so, really quickly we began to work with these families, and that's when we founded Battlefield Addiction. Battlefield Addiction is an organization that works with an individual family and sees how to cut off resources and sees how to strategize and sees how to treat that person to move them. And I always say it's like Novocaine, just give it time. It always works. We just do the right moves. We just move them into and moving them down the stages of change until they get to a place where it feels like they self-determined that they want to be there. It feels like that, but in actuality, life did that. You see? So
I think that's applicable to all of life, right? There's actually rarely circumstances where we're making a fully autonomous choice that's entirely our own.
Yeah.
And it's not at all affected by everything surrounding us.
That's right.
That's never the case.
No,
that's what life
we
is.
don't change ourselves. Yeah. Life changes us.
Yeah.
It evolves us. That's right.
And then you're teaching people how to respond to that.
Yeah.
And how many years has Battlefield Addiction been in operation?
We started in 2014, and we began to help one family at a time, and that was the key. How do we move this person along, and how do we treat it so that they want to be in recovery? And that was the work. And it's been work different with every family. Every family we take on, there's kind of different circumstances. But it's like a mechanic. You work on so many different types of engines, but at one point you've been through all the engines. Like you can hear the tick, like, okay, that's that kind of family. And then the moves are kind of all similar with that kind of family or whatever is going on. Oh, we have a person that comes from a single mother. Or we have a person that comes from a biological family. There's different ways to handle all that. And that's what we've kind of learned and practiced.
And this is in this greater Seattle area.
South King County area mostly, but we've done work with people on Zoom all over the country, and we've been with a lot of families. So
very cool. Well, and many of our listeners will know that Discovery just recently released a policy plan with recommendations authored by myself and Dr. Robert Marbett for Seattle's leaders to address this crazy increase in unsheltered homelessness, 10,000 now, on track to be 20,000 in a couple years. And one of the things we notice is that many of the people experiencing homelessness here are not from the area, right? So they have family, a support network, community in a different state, in a different county, maybe in a different country. And we emphasize the importance from a clinical perspective of people being with their family, in their support network, in order to successfully recover from addiction. And that's more difficult if you just arrived to Seattle and you're surrounded by users and your support network is not here. You guys are doing that in practice, I think. The importance of family in recovery. Is there anything, can you speak to that significance?
We've got to have people in our life that validate our good behavior. We've got to have people to do it for. We've got to have people to say, hey, I got a new job, or hey, I got a new car, or I've got my own place and I'm independent, or whatever. We have to have people to do it for. And I think that's what a good community provides, is proper validation of proper behavior. And I think that's how people get better, is they get validated by their good behavior and not their bad behavior. And I think that the slippery slope that we go down in Seattle is that we maybe validate bad behavior, that we maybe say it's okay to do that. And then the more outlandish it gets, and the more validation people get. And it seems to be that the more that someone's life's a mess, the more the world responds to them, and the more power they can get with the world. And I think we have to validate good behavior, and I think we have to call out bad. And that's just my thing in creating a healthy community.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And that's the work that we've done in creating a healthy community that says, hey, we want more from you. And you'll want more for yourself, because when you come in and say you've done something good, we're going to reward that. We're going to all say, hell yeah, that's what we want here. And so, and with families, with that aspect of what we're doing with this, a lot of the people that are here might not have their family. A lot of the people might be coming there, but I'm going to put it in terms like this of why that's happening. Why are people coming here? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if a family came to me and they said, "Hey, I have a loved one and they're in my basement and they're using drugs," and then I said, "Well, do they have any food? Are they hungry? Let's make sure they're not hungry. Let's make sure they have food down there. Are they going to the bathroom and the toilet, or is it somewhere else that we need to send someone down and clean up?" And then I said, "Well, let's keep them in the house. Let's bring in more drugs, and let's make sure they have clean paraphernalia to use those drugs." Well, what that would cause is they would call their friends. And pretty soon, people would get the word out that you can safely use drugs in this house. And imagine how crazy it would if I was going to tell a family that I was going to help them with their loved one, and then at the same time provide all that safety for them to use drugs. That somehow I was going to help them with their loved one, but not stop the drug use. That there would be the insanity of that everyone would come to a consultation with Battlefield and just walk out and go, "Those people are crazy. They want my kid to continue to use drugs, and they're going to teach me how to make it safe for them to use drugs like fentanyl." That would be insane. And everyone knows that. But that's kind of exactly in the House of Seattle, that's what we're kind of doing. We're kind of saying, let's not stop the drug use. Let's help it. Let's make sure that it can be done in a different manner or something. And let's make sure they have enough fuel in their body to continue to go. And let's make sure they have never-ending resources such as being able to steal and provide for their addiction. And let's just do that.
What do you say to the people? So you're mentioning being able to use safely, and I think we've set up maybe kind of a false dichotomy. Or what is your response between safety? Well, they might be dead if we don't do this, right?
My response
and so it's better to help them use safely than to leave them.
Well, if you've ever had a loved one that's using fentanyl, if you ever heard that maybe a treatment center, that you sent your loved one to a treatment center and wanted them to stop using drugs, but rather the treatment center was letting him do it in his room, would you be angry with the treatment center? And you would be outraged. You go, how can they do this? How do they even, and for me, when someone's using fentanyl around me and I'm trying to get it to stop, I've lost people. I've lost people in the program. I've lost tons of people. And for me, if somebody's using fentanyl at any time, somebody needs to be watching them full time with Narcan, the whole time. And for us to not do that, to me, if I didn't do that, I would feel negligent because I know they're about to die. I know it. And so I now would feel totally negligent letting somebody do it and having them be, and then I would look at their family and go, yeah, I knew they were using, but I thought that they could just do it safely that day. And I thought the idea was they were warm means safe. We've had tons of people lost, and we've never losing people on the streets. None of the people in our community that we've lost, none of the families that have lost one on the streets. They've all been provided a safe place to do it, behind a closed door, in a shed that somebody provides, somewhere where no one's watching them, somewhere where it just happens. And so it's really scary to consider that someone thinks that anyone can use these drugs safely. And even meth, when it pertains to meth, what we're seeing is people go out one time and come back with a permanent schizophrenic state. And we have family members after family members will tell you that happened to their family, that they went out on a relapse, came back, and now they're never the same. One time. And so we're dealing with drugs that cannot be, that the harm cannot be reduced.
Yeah. There is no safe way.
There is no safe, and it's insane to think so.
Yeah. In a previous conversation we've had, you said something really interesting that I would love for you to share here and unpack if you're willing to, which is that there are 3 types of bottoms that we're not letting people hit. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Can you share that? Because I thought that was a really helpful way of thinking about what you're saying.
Well, in my experience, when a family comes to me, I have to determine, first of all, we need to create a bottom, and I have to determine which one that's going to be. And in my experience, difficulty and financial issues are one bottom. It becomes too difficult, too consequential, too hard to get high. And that's a bottom for a person. And that's a good one. Becomes too much damage for them. It doesn't work. Another one is an emotional bottom. Somebody feels too much guilt over the fact of what they're doing to other people. Really the guilt for what they're doing in their life, and the guilt for hurting their loved ones or not having their kid or whatever. And that's a great emotional bottom. I always say, like, what bottom did Eminem hit? You see, he didn't hit a difficulty or financial bottom. He could have continued to get high forever. And well, the third bottom, before I start, is that it's a physical bottom. Death, losing a limb, in a hospital. So we have these three bottoms. And you look and you go, oh, what? Eminem, we didn't want him to die, right? He didn't want to die. He didn't want to hit that. And he never got to the point where he almost dead. And then he didn't hit the financial difficult bottom. So he hit an emotional bottom, where he started feeling guilty for the way he was behaving, or he wasn't spiritually fit in that moment, or whatever it was, that bottom that he hit. And that's a lucky one. That's a real lucky one. You don't see many people that are not sick and still have an ease to get high hit that. And so when we know people, so now I look at these three bottoms and I go, well, what's going to happen? Is this person going to hit a difficulty bottom? Well, guess what? We need to provide difficulty. Guess what? As a family, we need to make it difficult so that they hit bottom. And hopefully our bumper system of making it difficult here with the family will prevent them from difficulty in death and difficulty in their body. And so now I'm going to raise up this bottom here for this person. Or let's say it's a young girl who's very resourceful and being sex trafficked and stuff like that. Well, now that's scary, because they're always going to have somebody there to help them get high. They're always going to have somebody there to make it so they don't have to commit crimes or whatever they're doing. And so now, and we don't want them to die and hit that physical bottom. So now we're going to need an emotional bottom. We're going to need this, and that's a difficult one to kind of put on someone else. But I say in Seattle, we're taking all three away. We're taking all those bottoms away, and we're saying they're just going to somehow not hit a bottom. We're going to take all those bottoms away, and then somehow they're just going to have an epiphany and go, I'm not going to do this anymore. What is that epiphany you're talking about? Where is that place? When do you see that? Do you know I run a treatment program or a recovery program, and lo and behold, on the summer we go empty. Lo and behold, in the summer we go empty. Why? Because it's warm outside. And then as soon as October hits, the place is packed. Well, there's a great example of difficulty driving people in. So why aren't we providing more of that? Why aren't we saying, hey,
yeah,
you know?
I just think that's those three categories is such a helpful way of thinking about it, and thinking about the culture and the environment and the policies here or in other cities or across the U.S. that are raising those bottoms or taking them away. I think for those of us who don't have an experience with addiction and haven't been around this, which is the majority of the people making the policies and shaping the environment, it's like we don't want to create a rock bottom for someone. That sounds horrible. Yeah. That sounds mean. Yeah. That sounds cruel. And so how can we make this the most comfortable possible to bring people in, or to get them to a place where they can have that epiphany that you're saying that doesn't necessarily exist without those rock bottoms. It's a helpful segue into something I want to ask you about, which is methadone, which is these kind of medical assisted treatments that I think, I had Jenny Burton in here, and she described it as this obsession, and maybe this is, I want to hear your thoughts, an obsession with providing comfort for people, making sure no one ever feels uncomfortable or feels discomfort, and that can end up keeping someone in a place, on methadone for 30 years. She knows someone. Yeah. Because no one wants to make this woman uncomfortable. Well, and then you're stuck.
I take a middle ground in this. Yeah. I was a methadone addict on the street level for 10 years. Okay. I really enjoyed it. It was a drug that got me high every day. I love the high it provided, and I stayed high on it for years.
And this is methadone?
This is methadone, yes.
Okay.
That was my drug of choice from the time I moved on to heroin later, but I was still doing methadone. It was still my first go-to. I loved it. It's a great smooth
This is
high.
methadone that people get treatment for.
It's a great high. It lasts 2 days. It has a longer half-life, whatever. It's smoother. It's great. It's an amazing high. So for me, I know that happens. Now, maybe it doesn't get everyone high the way it got me high, but I had a lot of friends that was methadone addicts with me. We traded it on the streets. So with the Suboxone, it's a useful tool. It's there as a tool.
Can you explain the difference between methadone and Suboxone?
Well, in my experience, one methadone gets people a little more, they're nodding off, they're high, they're having some of the same effects as someone that just shot up heroin sometimes. And then sometimes people do methadone and you can't tell. But in my experience, methadone is stronger and has more euphoric qualities. Suboxone doesn't have that same euphoric qualities, and it also has blockers in it. So the Suboxone is a useful tool, and it's useful for detox. It's really helpful. But my thing is this. I don't know why we're telling people that full recovery, full abstinence isn't for you. I don't like that part. I think every person that I know that's in this thing can actually get sober and fully recovery. And I don't like that we take that option away from people. I don't like that. So I think that for me, it's a very dicey thing. We're having great things. What we do is, we want people to use it for a little while to try to get them, and then we do the Sublocade shot, and that it wears off and they get off it.
Okay.
And that's kind of our mechanism.
What is the shot?
It's just a shot that they take that provides it for 30 days.
Okay.
And they don't have to take it every day, and then they get a lesser dose, and pretty soon they're off it.
Yeah.
And we can get this process done in under 6 months.
No, I think that's great. I think that's probably where I land, is that use this as a tool and not an alternative to being clean.
Well, and then there's another aspect of it. For me personally, I was not just opiate addict, okay? I loved every drug. I loved everything that made me feel different. What it took for me, and the problem with Suboxone for me, is it didn't give me the moral fiber to stay sober on the other drugs. So for me, there was an underlying thing that, like, I needed to touch life. I needed all the pain of it. I couldn't have a film over me. And if I had a film over me, I kind of doubted myself and my own sobriety, and I said, well, I'm not really truly sober. Now this is me personally. Yeah. I wasn't truly so for me in the end, luckily my father said, and he didn't even know what the stuff was, but when he forced me to be into recovery and treated me that way, he said, I don't want to hear nothing about those drugs. And there is an odd thing. See, there is this kind of quandary that we're in, that somebody has told us that the best way to get off drugs is drugs.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, wow. And then you kind of go, well, who are the people telling us that the best way to get off drugs is drugs? Is it people that have gotten off drugs telling us that? Or is it the experts? Is it the pharmaceutical people? Who's telling us this?
Yeah, is it the people that make money off of providing the drugs to get you off the drugs?
And people, that's right. People think I'm hung up on this, but I'm hung up on the language, and I get hung up because somebody told me that I have a substance use disorder, and I disagree. That's not my identity. I'm an addict. I call myself an addict. I'm proud of it. I'm very proud of it. And I'm proud of my recovery. And if you tell me I had a disorder, then I was a victim for 17 years. And you can't tell me that. And so I get hung up on the language, but also because I don't like that. And I don't think any addict cares what you call him. I don't want to say that there's some kind of force behind the language, but to me, if you say the word addict, it means it needs to stop. And if you take the word disorder, it means it needs to be medicated. To me, that's kind of how I think of it. And to me, that's a scary proposition that, okay, well, that opens the door to, like, come on, they have a disorder. Well, we haven't treated addiction like that ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And what if we did this for alcoholics? That's my other point here. So we need to not arrest people that drink and drive. We should stop that because they've got an alcohol use disorder. It's not their fault. We need to like do harm reduction when it comes to alcohol. We need to put, like you said, we need to put bumpers in the car so they're safe if they maybe hurt someone and cause an accident. We need to, we won't put the bumpers on the outside of the car to protect other people. We'll put the bumpers on the inside of the car to protect them if they get in an accident. And that would be harm reduction when it pertains to alcohol. So where is the harm reduction when it pertains to alcohol? In fact, why aren't we then? Okay. But see, alcoholism people still get mad at that. People still say, you need to change. You need to stop drinking. And that's what happens, though. And that's a good system.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Whether it's the person's fault or not how they got there, the treatment is the same. It has to be, the person has to be held responsible. The treatment's the same. If someone's going to change their life, they have to be responsible for changing it. I've never seen anyone go, I didn't get sober. The system got me sober. But when people aren't sober, they say the system made it so I'm not sober. And that's the truth, is we have all these people not sober and we're blaming the system. The system is not standing between them and the dealer. We should be. Now we could take credit for actually stopping it. You see? But I can't take credit. It's not anything. I give information, and if the person's treated right before they get to me, they use that information. And if they're not, they disregard the information. Then it's just, no, I'm going to go back and do this because it's easier than that. So, I get angry about the language because I don't know why someone changed my identity. I don't like that. And, our company, our organization is called Battlefield Addiction, not Battlefield Substance Use Disorder. And I'm sorry, but that's just how I am, because addiction needs to be stopped.
Have you ever had anyone in your program not like that name?
Never. They love it.
Yeah.
They love it. We love it. And as an addict, I think what people should understand is that addicts are powerful people and they're not victims, and addicts are people that identify as being an addict, and that's not what stops people from using drugs. That's not what makes people use drugs. I used drugs because I wanted to be an addict. That's why I used drugs. I liked that identity. It was way cooler than all the other shit I had going on, you see? So I'm proud of it, and a lot of people are proud of it. And why I get angry and why I get a little offended is nobody asked us. Nobody went to the NA meeting and said, what do you all want to be called? In fact, it's the opposite. We're all still in NA meetings saying, hi, I'm Mike, I'm an addict. Hi, I'm Art, I'm an addict.
Yeah.
So what gave everyone the right to do that?
I think that's the exact same, both on the language side and the policies like harm reduction. I think a lot of it ends up being more about how those of us who have never walked through these things, how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about treating others, and not about people who have actually been through it and come out the other side. I mean, harm reduction, I think a lot of it, even the autonomy piece, makes us feel good about ourselves. Like, I can justify not stepping in, not intervening, not letting someone hit rock bottom if I feel like it makes me a better person, or I can morally accept the fact that I let them make that choice for themselves, or I didn't stigmatize them, or I didn't cause them suffering.
But what about the harm then it causes?
Them.
So let's take a harm reduction standpoint on a family that comes to me. And the mother comes and says, I have 3 kids in my house. They're all younger than their sister who's suffering from addiction or who is an addict. And I have my life and everything going on. And I go, well, let's reduce the harm on the person using drugs in your house. Let's forego the damage that's happening in the house. Let's forego that there is a needle laying on the ground in a room. Let's forget all that, and let's just reduce the harm on the individual that's doing this. But I think harm reduction could be looked at two ways. Are we harm reducing on the individual that's doing it, or are we reducing harm on society? And so what I have to teach people is how to reduce harm on their family.
Yeah.
I have to teach harm reduction, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Meaning, when I teach harm reduction on society, it also gives the addict necessary treatment.
Yeah.
So when I protect the family and their rights, the addict now has to seek help. And so there is that. Let's talk about harm reduction in Seattle. Let's talk about, are less people dying or more? And if we're say reducing harm but more people are dying, maybe we're not.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just not true. And you can use whatever study you want to show, but we know the empirical evidence. We're seeing it getting worse. Mm-hmm. So there, and I can say, hey, well, maybe, and we hear it all the time. Well, we don't want our person to die. Well, you're letting them do fentanyl. Yeah, but we don't want them to die. But you're letting them do fentanyl, and fentanyl is the thing that's going to kill them. Yeah, but we don't want them to die. So we don't want them to die. So we're going to make sure that they're warm and fed while they do fentanyl.
Yeah.
Well, that's not going to help. We don't look at somebody that died from a fentanyl overdose and go, wait, were they warm? Did they have clean foil? What happened?
Yeah.
We don't look. Why aren't we looking then? If it's harm reduction, why aren't we looking after the overdose death and go, well, it's because they didn't have clean foil. It's because they weren't well fed. It was because they were warm. We're not looking.
This is why Andrea Suarez, who's also been on the show, calls it hospice, refers to it as hospicing people in place. It's exactly that. It's
sad.
Creating a comfortable environment for someone to die in, and that's not at all harm reduction, not at all what we want to see from our city. I want to get your thoughts on the ways to intervene and the solutions to this, and especially on the carceral system and the role of law enforcement and incarceration. And I think that's can be a dividing line on this issue. You know, there's a spectrum. Is it we decriminalize and it's not illegal to use drugs in public, it's not illegal, whatever, all the way to, you know, safer supply, we're going to actually supply you drugs, to, you know, we should round everyone up and they should be in jail.
Well, what I would say like
what
this.
What are your thoughts?
What if we have to get ourselves out of the way? What if we have to truly get our own identities, get ourselves completely out of the way? Meaning, what if we have to think, okay, tomorrow, if this person uses fentanyl, they could die. And we have to think of ourselves in the position and the responsibility of not letting that person die. So I want people to understand that if you let this person do fentanyl today, I also want you to go to the funeral and say you allowed it. And you sit there and you take and see what you got out of it and see if he really helped. And if we took ourselves as a community of people that maybe people were drinking Clorox down on the street today and it somehow gave them a high. If it was Clorox, and we would be grabbing it out of their hands. We would be arresting it in any sense. I am not here saying anybody needs to be punished. I'm saying we need leverage. I'm also understanding that the criminal justice is overworked.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the capacity to do what we want it to do. That doesn't change the facts. To help a human being that's on drugs, we need to, one, stop the drugs. We need to give them treatment that prompts recovery. And in order to do that, we have to have leverage and power. And love comes into play later. Love comes into play when a person has their wits about them. And then we can now work on this connection with a human being. And we can go, hey, I always hear the opposite of addiction is connection. I always hear that. Well, maybe that's true. Okay, but listen, it's not on anyone else. If my addiction was caused by a lack of connection, then it's on me to connect with people. It's on me to get sober and then begin to build relationships. It's not on anyone else to connect with me. Otherwise, I'd be sitting there going, well, sobriety didn't work again. No one connected with me. No one loved me. That's not true. It's true they need connection, but it's their responsibility now to see what's in the way of that, to see their resentments or their victimhood or you know, their anger with people or whatever's in the way of their connection. And it's on them, and we need to teach them that. And in order to teach them that, you got to get them sober. And so whenever I hear people talking about anything, any way to help a drug addict, and the first step isn't getting them sober, I honestly know you're not helping them. I honestly know, there's no doubt in my mind. I'm sorry if that's true, but it's just true. You can't say, hey, I helped this drug addict tremendously. They're still using fentanyl today. Yeah. Because the fact is, if they die today, you cannot tell me you helped them. You were part of their death. That's what happened. You participated in their death. And so for us to get to a point where we first understand what helping is really means, it means to, one, get them sober, and then we can provide love and care and kindness and all those things that really help. And you're going to have to learn, if you help someone, you're going to have to learn to try to be kind still when you're getting gaslit. Try to be kind when you're being told that now you're ruining their life because you're getting them sober. And you have to take those bullets.
Yeah.
And it's not easy because helping people doesn't always make you feel good.
Yeah.
And maybe if it does, you're not helping.
Yeah.
Does a physical trainer feel good when he's requiring more of people? Or do you think he would feel better going, hey, take the day off. You don't got to get better. Just take the day off. We'll sit and have cookies. You see? And that's the kind of help. But no, we would go, that guy can't help nobody. He's a terrible physical trainer. But this is the same thing as physical training. This is the same thing. We need to get a person's mind off the stuff. We need to get their body whole again. We need to get the mind whole again. And then we need to require more.
Yeah. And I think that is the truest form of love, you know, that's not separating love and waiting until later, that is the most, that is true love, right? It's not letting someone continue to hurt themselves even when they don't see what they're doing or they think they want to keep doing it.
That's right.
And being willing to take,
and like I said,
the burden on yourself.
You can tell that there is some suspicion here. There's some suspicion in the different ways we treat alcohol and the way we treat fentanyl. I would find it very suspicious that anyone that's dealing with an alcoholic knows what needs to happen first. There's no one that thinks they can help an alcoholic while he's drunk. There's no one that thinks that. There's no one that's going, hey, what we need is to drive this alcoholic around to the bars. What we need is, no one's thinking that. But see, fentanyl is a different equivalent of drunk. It's the same thing. It's not different. But why are we treating it different? You see, that's suspicious to me that people aren't going, I mean, why are still people convicted of DUIs? Stop. They didn't do it. It's not their fault.
Yeah. There's a lot of parallels like that where it doesn't make sense. Although I did see earlier this year in San Francisco, in the Tenderloin, there was a program taxpayer funded to provide alcohol to alcoholics, not with the goal of weaning them off or getting them clean. It was simply it was harm reduction. And so you can come in here and a nurse will give you beer, shots of... And so we are following that. I mean, does follow the logical conclusion of
But it's so
this
simple
kind of
to see that if your brother or your husband was an alcoholic and we saw a wife bringing alcohol to her husband every day and then giving him hospice in the bedroom, we would immediately say that wife is sick. Yeah. We would say she's gotten sick from this. And so that's what I think. I think we've gotten sick from this. Absolutely. And are convincing ourselves. We're trying to prove this identity of this loving, caring people, but it's not helping. Yeah. And so, it's a dangerous slope. Is there anything else that you'd like to add or share from your experience? I think that what I just want, we need to get aligned. I think that this stuff, this addiction stuff, and this substance use disorder stuff, or whatever you call it, I think that it's not what tears us apart. I think that we're torn apart by not what's happening, but what to do about it. I think everyone can come up with a solid plan, and they know what they think is best. The problem is that we're not aligned, and the problem is getting people aligned. And the question that I have for people is, what is the best possible way to treat this so it ends? And if we can all have that as a priority, we want to make it stop. We don't want to participate in it. We don't want to be a role. We don't want to play a role in it. The only role we want to play is stop. And my family all played their roles. My dad played the hero. My mom played the enabler. My one sister played angry and wouldn't talk to me. See, there's always sympathy and anger surrounding this. And that's why it's difficult, is because the people that are angry, they're not angry at the people that are suffering from addiction. They're angry at the people that enable addiction. So that the divide starts happening in the family. My dad is not mad at me anymore. He's mad at my mother for pandering to me. He's mad at my mother for the excuses she gave for me. And then my sisters are mad at my parents because they're not treating it properly. And so now it starts tearing your family apart. And that's what's happening in our community. We're getting torn apart. And all the while, the addicts are dying. All the while, they're folded in half on a street. And we're still up in rooms and boardrooms debating about what to do about it and arguing with our own righteousness. But the question is, who have you got sober? Because the way that we help these people is we get them sober. And I'm not talking about the down in their luck people that are homeless. I'm talking about the people that are using fentanyl and meth. I'm saying there is only one way to help them. That's get them sober. Let's align as a community and decide that getting them sober is our priority. And then let's use whatever means necessary. Yeah. And they'll thank us later.
Yeah.
They'll be mad at us now, but they'll thank us later. And they're going to look at us when they're sober, and they're going to look us in the eye and say, thank you. And I know that from thousands of people that I've done it for. So people that I'm trying to get sober, my father said it to me. He said, son, if you're on drugs, I will always be the enemy. I will feel like the enemy to you. And he goes, it's because I'm trying to stop what you're doing. And your body and your mind is going to want to keep doing it. But I'm going to be the enemy to you because I'm trying to stop it. And every moment you take drugs, there I'll be. And there'll be nowhere for you to go. And that's how I'm going to be for you. So my father was a stand for me. And that's what we need to be. We need to be a stand for people. And we need to say, don't care how it affects us. It's about being a stand for you. We require this of you. You can do it all the way. You're just as good as me. You're not some baby bird that is so weak that can't do anything for yourself. So here it is. We're going to get up. Come with me.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to? Go over there with this officer. Go somewhere else. This is it. So
fantastic.
So I think community stand is what we need to be, and we need to get aligned on getting people sober is how you help them.
Yeah.
And anything you do before getting them sober hurts them.
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And I think that your life and the work that you're doing at Battlefield are just a testament to the truth in what you're saying, and it's changing people's lives.
Thank you.
For the better.
There's a lot of people doing the work. A lot of people.
And so we need to get behind them, the ones that are doing good work. I so appreciate being able to learn from people like Art, who have walked through addiction themselves and now lead others out of it. Those are critical voices to any conversation about addiction, treatment and recovery, and drug policy. I hope you learned something new as well. Thank you for watching and listening, and be sure to follow or subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode of Restorations.